Right, lots to discuss with the government today. I'm delighted to say that Ed Miliband is here with me, the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. Very good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning, good to be with you.
Great to see you. And so today's announcement from your department is about wind farms.
It's about a really, excuse me, a very important investment that we are making through Great British Energy, our publicly owned energy company, £300 million that is being set aside in advance of the spending review so that we can build the supply chains in offshore wind, the factories that will manufacture the wind turbines, the blades, the base for the wind turbines. And there's a huge opportunity here, jobs for engineers and welders, construction workers. And it's part of our whole argument, which is this clean energy transition is about, it's an unprecedented economic opportunity, probably our biggest economic opportunity to contribute to economic growth. We want Britain to be the safe haven for the world, for global investors to come here, and we think we have a good chance of that happening.
At the same time, the other thing that's grabbed headlines this week relating to solar panels, and Chinese solar panels. You want to rule out any Chinese slave labour being used in items that are manufactured to reach the UK. Nonetheless, whether it's wind parts, solar parts or battery parts, Chinese supplies will be needed?
China is part of our global supply chains. In fact, they've got a very big role in global supply chains. That's built up over a long period. Absolutely, we don't want to use slave labour. What we're doing, though, is trying to build up our British manufacturing base. And this is really, really important. And this wasn't done in the past. You know, we care about making, buying and selling things in Britain. And so this investment that we're making today is part of that. But I'll be honest with you, that's not going to happen overnight. And look, part of this also, we've got a big international energy summit happening in London today and tomorrow, 60 countries represented, 50 global companies too. One of the things that we'll be discussing there is how we can have the supply chains across the world to give us the materials we need for clean energy. We don't want dominance of any country in these supply chains, but you know, making sure you have that diversity, given the position that we've inherited, is going to take time.
But I mean, various targets to hit, some quite soon, 2030. Yeah. China will be central to the supply chain by
China's got an important role to play, but look, we're confident we can meet our targets. We're confident we can procure those solar panels in a way that definitely doesn't use slave labour. But there's a broader point here, which is Britain, just to take an example, has done reasonably well in offshore wind generation, but we haven't generated the jobs here. We haven't been doing the manufacturing here. That's what we want to change.
Is something linked to wind in particular? Regional pricing, if you've got wind farms or eyesores of that ilk near you, can lead to lower prices. I guess that would be the spin you want to put on it, but of course for many others they'll be saying they'll be paying relatively higher prices for energy. Is it fair that that is going to happen?
So this is a very complicated issue that you're referring to that my department is looking at around so-called zonal pricing. Look, I'll be honest with you, we're still looking at the details of this, which is something we've got to really, really get right, and we're studying in detail the effects. Look, my bottom line here is we want to cut bills and we want to do so in a way that's fair. And we want to make sure that happens. And you know, that's my test for any reforms that we make. There's very strong views on both sides of industry, as you'll probably have gathered, on this. People are fighting it out. We're going to take this, make a calm and considered decision on this.
It's interesting you mentioned on industry here, because I wanted to sort of explore their point of view on all of this. I get that there's a great opportunity to invest and create jobs in clean energy, but it takes time, as you've already acknowledged. And industry at the moment is being punished severely because of our higher energy costs. I mean, just to give the numbers again, this comes from your own department's report. 26 pence per kilowatt hour is the cost of industrial energy in this country. In the US, it's 6.5p, 26 to 6.5. We're comfortably the most expensive in the G7, and 20 years ago we weren't. What can you do about that during this Parliament?
We've got to move as quickly as possible to clean power. You see, take the steel industry, which has been really in the news recently. What UK Steel say, the body representing the steel industry, is it's now our exposure to natural gas, to the fluctuations of natural gas prices, and the fact that gas sets the price a large percentage of the time in the UK, and these prices tend to be higher, which is driving these higher prices. And that's got to change. And that's why our clean power mission is so important. Because, often people think, well, clean power, that sounds like it's about climate change. And obviously it is. But it's about much more than that. It's about us having homegrown clean energy that we control. And that's what I think will be good for business and be good for families.
But I don't think the steel industry are saying that it's as black and white as that it's gas prices that causes our higher energy costs. I mean, some people would argue it's exactly the opposite, at least in the short term, for the foreseeable future, not to mention the long-term problem of things like wind, which of course means we'll always have to rely in some part on fossil fuels. But again, the cost in the short term is prohibitive. In the US, it's gone in the other direction as they produce more of their own gas. This Parliament, are you acknowledging you can't address that issue?
No, absolutely not. We can address it, and we look at it all the time. But I just want to pick you up on this point, because you say, and you don't think the steel industry are saying that. I promise you they are. What UK Steel say, and it's really important because there is misinformation going on from some of our political opponents on this, what they say, and I'm quoting here, is the primary driver of the difference between our prices and those of continental Europe is our exposure to natural gas. Generally, that is what they say. And it's true that some people want to use net zero, and let's just surface this, and to try and pretend that this is about net zero. It isn't. And that's not what UK Steel say.
I'll come to that point then in a moment. But first, let's go back to the main point. 26p versus 6.5p. You're saying you're going to address that this Parliament?
We're going to definitely try and reduce our industrial energy prices.
This is different. This is different. I get that long-term, homegrown clean energy might lower prices, but you've already acknowledged that will take time. Gas is by far the most important part of our energy mix in the short term. I think it's also fair to businesses to acknowledge that you're not going to drastically alter those prices during this Parliament.
Look, I'm not going to make promises I can't keep, but what I am saying to you is industrial energy prices is something we are very, very aware of, and every solar panel we put up, every wind turbine we build, every piece of infrastructure we build, and this is controversial, will help us get off natural gas and our reliance on these fossil fuel markets and get us onto cheaper, homegrown, clean power. And we're going to go as fast as possible with that, and this will help address some of the issues you're talking about.
One other big cause of this, and maybe we could argue all day long about what the primary issue is that energy companies in this country are taxed at 78% on energy profits. That pushes up prices too.
No, that's wrong. Look,
it's not 78%?
It is 78%, but it's not incredible.
Whereas obviously regular corporate tax is 25%.
It's really important to make this point. Oil and gas is set, the price of oil and gas is set on the international market. The reason why...
That's the raw commodity price, in the same way that the prices of batteries is set on the raw, the raw commodity price.
It's not set by the tax rate on UK companies, is what I'm saying. It's set by the global price. You see,
I understand that, but you're saying that tax rates don't impact pricing?
I'm saying that in relation to oil and gas, they don't, because the truth is that the price for our oil and gas is set internationally. And let me explain. Let me just, if you just let me make the point. Why did prices go through the roof when Russia invaded Ukraine? Right, well, our prices went through the roof, even though we imported a very small amount from Russia. That's because whether the gas was coming from the North Sea or internationally, it was priced on the international market. That's why we're in the grip of fossil fuel markets controlled by others, petrostates, and that wasn't about the UK tax rate. The UK tax rate could have been cut or higher, and it wouldn't have made an impact.
That's a separate point.
Yeah.
The floating price of commodities is a legitimate but separate point. Another point for why this country has unbelievably high energy prices is that we tax our energy companies.
No, you're wrong. I'm really sorry, but you're wrong about that because the price is set internationally. I'm really sorry, but that's not correct.
OK, well, let's put commodities aside. If you increase taxes on supermarkets to 78%...
It depends whether it's...
If you increase taxes on supermarkets to 78%, what would happen to the price of food?
It depends.
What would happen to the price of food?
It depends whether it's a domestic market where the price is set domestically.
This is a globally unquestionable factor about economics. You're right that your point also applies. You can't flatly deny my point.
I am denying your point when it comes to the question of these internationally set prices. That's the point I'm making to you.
If you lowered the tax of 78% on energy companies to the regular...
On oil and gas companies, it wouldn't make a difference to the price. In fact...
Yes, it would.
I'm afraid it wouldn't because the point is that the price is set internationally.
But there are lots of things that factor into the price that we pay. The lots of supply chain costs you've mentioned yourself. This is a huge cost in the supply chain of getting energy to people in this
So
country.
we'll have to disagree about this, but I'm convinced of my argument. What is
no,
the
but
case?
This is great. Hold on. Then
what is the case?
Why don't we just tax every business at 78%? Why
No, I'm not in favour of that at all, because the question...
Why not? But there's no cost to it. You get more money and the same prices.
I didn't say there was no cost to it. I said where the price gets set. The truth is that what it defines in the UK context is how let me finish the point, is how investable propositions in oil and gas are. That's why, for example, the Treasury has been consulting with the industry in the North Sea on the precise rate to set the tax. So obviously tax is a relevant question, but I'm afraid to say that when you say that if the tax was lower, the prices would be lower, you're wrong about that.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that. I mean, again, we should just tax everyone at a higher one. We do.
I'm not saying that, no.
I mean, it's a win-win, easy thing to do.
No, I'm not saying that, actually.
But final question, I know we're out of time. A lot of talk about Conservatives and reform yesterday and some comments from Robert Jenrick. An alliance between the two would trash the current polling that Labour's getting. Is it a concern for Labour as you approach the
No,
election?
our concern is about how we do what we're elected to do, which is to change the country in positive ways. How we make a difference to our economy, creating good jobs, as I'm seeking to do through our mission on going clean energy superpower, creating energy security, cutting health service waiting lists, which has now happened 6 months in a row. So our concern is not about what these other parties are going to do. Our concern is about meeting the mandate from the British people.
Ed Miliband, great to see you as always. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you so much.
The Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero.